You found your perfect soulmate. Conversations about likes, dislikes, personal history, and childhood growing pains have been open and easy. But somehow, when it comes to conversations about money, they're much more difficult. Why is that? Didn't their family talk about money openly? How can we decide whether or not to rent a particular apartment or house without talking about how it will affect our financial situation? Today's guest is Adam Cole, a financial couples counselor who will help us navigate these issues. It's couples, renting, and money on today's episode of Renter Confidential. With all of the increasing inflation and rent and financial stress going on, it seems that our relationships are being stretched further than ever. How can couples who rent address their challenges and keep their relationships with their significant others together and healthy? Today, we're joined by Adam Cole. Adam is a certified financial therapist, certified mediator, tax attorney, and a former financial advisor. He provides powerful and wide-ranging financial counseling for couples. I met Adam at a conference called FinCon in 2019, and we recently reconnected as he answered some questions related to my upcoming book, Rental Application Secrets. Hi, Adam. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Justin. It's great to be with you again.
Absolutely great to see you again. And one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is the shift from being a financial advisor to being a financial therapist. And given the stresses that people are under, a therapist sounds much more, appropriate than an advisor.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's a mix of things. I've been fortunate to find something where I am good at it and I enjoy it, and there's a real need out there because, like you said, I mean, and even before inflation, even before COVID, there have always been financial stresses, and frankly, even couples who make good money, they still have financial stress and disagreements, tension, avoidance, anxiety. And how I ended up here was really through responding to that call. Uh, it's over 6 years ago now, realizing that there was a big need and it really wasn't being met. At the time, there were very few titles, books about couples' finances and how to do it together as a team.
Mm-hmm.
The books that were out there were just about how to make more money, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I think that I can maybe help couples out here. With my background, I also studied economics, right? Always been in this world. After law school, got a master's in tax law and had become a certified mediator. And I decided to focus on couples, which is what I've done for the last 6+ years. And I know you mentioned your book. I also am, at time of recording, on the precipice of releasing my book about couples finances as well.
Yeah, yeah. And go ahead and give the audience the title.
Sure. So the book is called Financial Intimacy for Couples: How to Achieve Clarity, Teamwork, and Peace of Mind with Your Money. It'll be available on Amazon. Uh, Feel free, by the way, to message me if you want a copy. I'm going to have some promotional days where you can even get a free copy, a free electronic copy. But the idea of the book, I mean, first of all, what it is everything I've learned in the 6 years I've been doing this is in that book. It's almost like a step-by-step workbook. So what I've done over time with my coaching clients is we have coaching sessions, but I've also created a whole curriculum with different modules, topics, videos, downloads, activities, so that they can really accelerate their learning even in between sessions. And in essence, I took that curriculum and put it in writing. And
Gotcha.
of course, added some additional stories about clients and activities to do. But the book is meant to get you from where you are now to communicating in a healthy way, understanding yourselves and each other better when it comes to money, knowing where you're at financially today and where you want to get to,
Hmm.
and then actually having a roadmap that is going to get you from where you are to where you want to be, right? Achieving those most important upcoming goals for you, paying down your debt, saving for a down payment for a house, uh, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm. Yeah. So are you finding amongst your clients that those goals they're trying to achieve have become more difficult as rents have increased over time?
For sure. And look, I mean, you probably still more of an expert on this than I am, Justin, but it's like depending on where the couple lives, that calculus around do I rent, do I buy, how much is my rent compared to what my mortgage maybe could be, and what would it take for me to have enough cash for a down payment versus if I rent, I don't have to give up that cash, but I do get equity if I buy, right? Like those kind of back and forths. Yeah, I mean, with the price of housing continuing to rise, it's of course makes it more difficult. And I say housing, I mean rental and purchase. And so a lot of families then have less money in their pockets. And if they want to achieve the same goals, now they have to be even more intentional and discerning, um, which is really tough to do without teamwork, right?
Right.
Sometimes one person kind of strong arms the other, but it's not really what we're going for, right? We want a equal partnership where both people have input into the direction of the household, and they're both equally invested in making, I don't like to use the word smart financial decisions. I like to call it more aligned.
Hmm.
Smart implies it's almost like there's a right or wrong answer, or good or bad. Aligned means what's your situation? What are your goals? What matters to you? Let's try and make those things resonate.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's really what my book sets out to achieve. It's hard to do that if you are avoiding the topic because you're anxious about it or you're fighting every time it comes up.
Right.
So, besides that, it's nicer to have nicer conversations. Uh, it's essential to do that work. And but I also talk about financial intimacy. I named the book Financial Intimacy for Couples because my belief is not just like, let's stop fighting or let's, be able to build up that emergency fund. Those are great. Right? But my hope, my wish for not just what my book might contribute, but just in general where we move as a society is that it can actually be money can lead to greater intimacy as a couple if we're talking about it because it involves so much of our childhood and what we've learned and what we value and what scares us, what keeps us up at night, what we really long for, what we would do if money were no object, how we raise our families, where we
Hmm.
live, what we eat. It touches so many of these things. So if you're really connected to your partner about this, you're building more intimacy through that process, let alone, of course, creating a plan and working on it together also tends to bring people closer together.
Hmm. Yeah, so in your answer, you mentioned that sometimes one person in the couple kind of strong arms the other,
Hmm.
where like one person has an idea and a plan as far as what they'd like to see happen, and the other person may not have formulated their plan, or they may still be kind of working through whatever their process is. Um, and I've even personally I've seen situations where people say, well, this is what I want to do. You say you don't want to do it. Well, what's your alternative? And if you don't have one, right now at this second, then
Hmm.
we should go with the plan that I have. So how do you recommend couples kind of work their way through that and giving the other person time and space to
Yeah.
kind of catch up?
Well, the first thing is just to know that a plan that is wholly or almost entirely driven by one person and not both together, it's destined to fail in one way or the other. It probably won't achieve its financial goals, frankly, but even if it does, your relationship is going to be that much worse for the wear.
Mm-hmm.
You'll likely leave one partner feeling small, disempowered. Resentment is very likely to be there. Uh, Frustration in terms of day-to-day expenses if they're not sticking to the guidelines. The partner who didn't make the plan is feeling like they're nervous. They even go to the grocery store. They don't want their significant other to see that bill. It's like it can get heavy, it can get ugly, it can get toxic, even if it's not outward and overt, the arguments.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff is bubbling there under the surface, and it's not pretty. It comes out one way or the other: passive aggressive, resentful, disconnection, divorce, or a big old fight,
Mm-hmm.
or even hiding and lying about financial matters, which
Mm-hmm.
I do see quite a bit.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And so, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I assume this is edited so we can like cut things or no?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Okay. Because I feel like I didn't speak as much to your question as I wanted to. Um, so that's the first thing, is reality check that if it's a strong arm kind of situation, it's not going to get you where you really want to be. Um, and then beyond that, it's always a team effort, right? So the person who doesn't have the plan, who needs more time, part of this is, okay, well, what are you actually going to do? What kind of actions are you going to be taking so that
Mm-hmm.
you can be more actively a part of this, right? And it doesn't have to be, I make a proposal, you make a proposal, we pick the best one. It can also be much more of a collaborative process. It's not like one or the other. Um, but that person has to step up and start learning more, even if it's by talking with the spouse who maybe feels more confident in financial
Mm-hmm.
matters. And basically, for the spouse who's like already like on top of this stuff and like go, breathe, take a moment. And if you can figure this out now, everything you do is going to be so much more pleasant and richer and robust for the future, right? If you can have both people really on board, like from their own values, you're going to get a lot more enthusiastic participation, and
Mm-hmm.
that's going to help you achieve these goals. You might actually start both having creative ideas about how to save money in about this, or how to increase your income in that way, and that is going to help everything, right? Plus it's going to feel a whole lot better. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things about money, is it maybe can't buy all of happiness, but it can help alleviate stresses if it's used right. And if the topic is one that just creates animosity with you and your significant other, it's kind of defeating the purpose. But if we can
Yeah.
clear that out, then money can really be enjoyed for the benefits that it can give.
And now we'll take a break for our sponsor, Apartment Search Secrets. This free book removes stress from your apartment search. The link is in the show notes below, and here's the trailer for this amazing free book. That new job you've been looking for finally came through. So you're taking on a new adventure in a brand new city, which all means one thing: packing and the stress it brings. But you can drop all that stress for free with Apartment Search Secrets. With this short ebook at your side, you'll know your value as a renter. You'll know what the internet can't tell you. You'll see landlord problems coming a mile away. And you'll get the best perspective on your rental search. Visit rentalsecrets.net for your free copy today. And we're back. Yeah. Okay. So when people are out looking for rental properties, let's say, and there's always a mix of different amenities and neighborhoods
Hmm.
and that kind of thing going on, commute times and all of that.
Hmm.
Um, so, and all of these things are going to affect not only the price that they're paying for rent, but also the expenses
Yep.
around the property. So how do you recommend couples kind of work through those discussions so they can actually kind of reach
Hmm.
a decision about
Yeah.
what's most important to them?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I don't recommend. The biggest mistake that I see couples making is they go straight to the numbers or to some sort of formula and they're trying to figure it out. If you don't have a foundation, a baseline of not only a plan and goals and priorities, but also a foundation of feeling emotionally safe and a sense of trust that you can talk to each other about these things,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately going to the numbers is just spinning your wheels and likely to lead to conflict, right? I'd say don't try to make a perfect formula. Oh, well, each extra minute of commute is worth $6 a month, and then
Mm-hmm.
more miles on the car, but subtract that because it's a lease. But and I don't even know if the things I just said made any sense. The particulars, they were just I was throwing words out there, but don't worry about a precise formula. I'm not saying you shouldn't take a look and say, oh, right, if we live here, the rent is $50 more, but we're going to be paying an extra $100 a month in gas for the commute. Yeah, by all means consider that. But like in trying to see what's equal, it's really kind of a fool's errand. The
Mm-hmm.
key here is being able to feel that sense of trust and safety to talk about these things, that you can be honest about how you're feeling and how you value subjectively different amenities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't mind a long commute. They like the alone time. They like to be in their car listening to music. Some people, that commute is horrible,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, some people, they're like, I'm gonna actually use the gym in this development. Some of those people might use the gym. Some of those people might not actually use the gym, right? Be real, be honest, know yourself, and remember that it's this stuff, there's so much subjectivity to it in terms of your own preferences and values, let alone when you're trying to combine two people's preferences and values. And there's always uncertainty. How's this apartment going to work out? Are there going to be maintenance issues we didn't realize? Maybe we turns out we find some really great restaurants we didn't know about right in the walking distance. Oh wow. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like talk about it, share about it, talk about your preferences, your worries, things that excite you, and get a fair sense of the numbers without overstressing perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And then see if you can kind of maneuver your way to, okay, let's try this. It may not be perfect. It's possible that you'll make a decision and you would have wished you made a different one.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay, right? If you can cultivate a relationship where you allow space for making mistakes, that is really the juice because you're like, it's very possible you say 6 months in, "Ah, I wish we got that place downtown." And
Mm-hmm.
maybe both of you feel that way. Well, if you can handle that as a couple, support each other through that, and you can not get bogged down and then think about, well, what is it that downtown would have done better? Can we bring any of those things into our lives? What about maybe moving at the end of this lease versus getting mired in it and feeling frustrated or resentful? And by the way, that's another one where if one person strong arms the other into the place that they're living, if the one who was strong armed finds anything at all to dislike about the place, even if it's subconscious, they're going to be blaming their significant other. And
Yeah.
it's not a great place to be,
Yeah.
right? So sit down, talk it out, sketch the numbers, get an idea, but don't stress about having a perfect formula. It's their numbers matter, but it's also hearts and minds exercise. And if you can kind of balance those two and make it okay that you might make a wrong choice or a choice you wish you had done differently, then you can move forward.
Mhm. Yeah. And based on your answer, it kind of sounds like when this couple that we're talking about actually this is kind of finalizes their short list of properties that they're interested in, that they should actually take the property tour together.
I think so. I mean, for sure, if at all possible, at least FaceTime and, put the other person on.
Gotcha. 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 Um, so one of having been a property manager and taking people on property tours and all of this, there's now this technological trend toward self-touring, self-guided property
Hmm.
tours where the
Right.
property manager isn't there. One of the one of the benefits that people describe about that is that they can have this private conversation about the property without being overheard by the property manager.
Hmm.
Um, so as someone who counsels couples, like how important is that is it to have that private conversation, on the site during the tour?
I mean, it can be a nice benefit. Of course, the downside is you can't then maybe ask questions or get a
Mm-hmm.
feel for, is this property manager, do they sound like someone who cares about the community and knows what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, listen, in a perfect world, you'd be able to remember what you saw and what you thought about things and talk about it afterwards. Um, that may or may not be super feasible, and maybe you even do both. You take a virtual tour or you take a tour with either one first. And then if you're really interested in the property, try the other one so you can kind of real time talk about it. Right. The key is just to be able to get a chance to check it out and see how each of you feels about it, and discuss that and compare it with the numbers and the other data, like you said, commute times and other amenities and such like that.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so what the question that I had that prompted us to reconnect
Hmm.
was around, I was looking through a rental application and it asked about the marital status of the applicant. And it kind of got me thinking about, you know, a, the possibility of, well, one person in a relationship actually signing a lease for an apartment, um, where the other person wasn't necessarily, where the other person in the relationship wasn't on that same lease. And it may be a situation where that person is um tired of commuting long distances into the city for work every week, and they want to have a place where they can just sleep Monday through Friday and then come home on the weekends, kind of thing. um but it kind of got me thinking about like the potential repercussions for that spouse who's not on the lease. um and you had an interesting response to that, so I wanted to dive into that a little bit, while we were talking.
Sure, sure. Um, it's, I mean, first of all, if a couple's not married, uh, typically the contracts that one of them enters into, if they do it on their own, shouldn't really affect the other person.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's trickier if you are married, right?
Hmm.
And we've all heard of the idea of potentially being liable for each other's debts. I think this is one of those situations where you can read the law and you can read the court cases, but then you also have to be realistic about how it would look, how it would be applied. So what we talked about was that, first of all, each state is going to have its own laws. about how
Mm-hmm.
this works because states govern like this kind of marital stuff. Uh, and in many cases, they'll say, okay, if spouse A signs the lease and spouse B didn't know about it, or spouse B lied to them about it in some way, they might be able to get out of it.
Mm.
Here's the thing, that's hard. That's hard to prove. You want to
Uh-huh.
go and sue in court, and now you're having to basically talk on what maybe even public record about your spouse defrauding you and like lying to you. This
Mm-hmm.
is, could you potentially do it? Sure, but the between the costs of the legal help and the court costs and the emotional and toll on your relationship, uh, and you of being in court and feeling like you might be cutting down your partner and criticizing them, how likely is that it's going to happen, right? And I mean that's something that always have to think about. There are a lot of cases where you might have a certain legal right, but by the time you've even hired a lawyer for 1 minute, it's already cost you more than you could have possibly hoped to get in the
Mm-hmm.
case. And of course, this is huge in landlord tenant issues because a landlord who takes advantage of a tenant, let's say to the tune of $800, well,
Mm-hmm.
you go to a lawyer, they work for you for a couple hours plus court fees, you're already north of that.
Yeah.
And sometimes landlords know that and take advantage of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But as far as again with the couples, so you have state law to look at, and then if there's been any court cases relevant, and then you would look at the contract itself, right? So when you sign a lease, it's not necessarily one single contract that is coming from every single landlord or every single apartment building.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with home ownership, at least in Florida where I live, there is a standard form for purchasing a home that is approved by whatever professional like board or agency, and most people just work off of that form,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily the case in terms of the rental market. So contract could say, yeah, just the undersigned or just the person named here is the only responsible party. Simple, like the basic rule of contracts is you can contract for whatever you want. As
Right.
long as one each person is giving something and getting something, you contract for whatever you want. Uh, so you could say that. If it doesn't dictate that, it's it's kind of and if it's mushy like that, then it's going to be tough to prove in a court and to get a court to side with you,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, fraud is a big charge, and so it's can get very tricky, uh, which is why all the more reason that you want to start as soon as possible cultivating that sense of trust and safety around talking about money
Mm-hmm.
so that you can be transparent with each other, be on the up and up, so that you don't find yourself walking onto any landmines.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it was just interesting for me because while I saw that, you know, that line item on the rental application, I haven't read any leases that actually speak to that particular point. Um, which, and I guess if the lease doesn't speak to it, then you're going to be at the mercy of whatever precedents have been set in terms of court cases or what the state law says. Um, you
Yep.
know, which most people don't know. And as you point out, hiring an attorney to tell you what those are may cost you more than just finishing out the lease and paying whatever the landlord's asking for.
Right. Right. And these things, they they're trickier than they look sometimes. It's like one thing when you talk about renting is this idea of like habitability, that the apartment basically got to be suitable for someone to live in it. Well, when habitability is used in a contract, they may or may not give a particular definition for the term that's
Right.
then going to be important in court. Or even if there is some sort of like requirement in your state law or county law or city law about that's something called like a warranty of habitability, like the landlord is basically guaranteeing that the place is you can live in it. but then the law might have a specific definition, or the court cases that have applied the law might have defined it in a particular way. So you might know the kind of general definition of the word habitability, but that doesn't mean that you know enough to go and try and litigate a matter
Hmm.
like this, right?
Yeah.
Um, and whether you believe that's fair or unfair, I'm just saying that's kind of the situation that you typically end up in, especially because these cases are often not enough money to justify the costs that it would take to
Right.
see it. And it's a tough problem to overcome. I wish it didn't exist, but unfortunately it does.
Yeah, yeah, especially when a lot of it hinges around what was actually going on in someone's mind when they when they signed a particular document.
Yeah. I mean, like they might ask you about communications you had with your spouse or whatever. And like you said, what people were thinking, what they understood from what the other was saying. It's like, and when we talk about defrauded, like fraud is like a pretty intense crime. I don't just mean the act of fraud, but like what it entails. Like the person would have had to basically intentionally
Hmm.
mislead you or hide things from you
Hmm.
in order to convince you to like assent to a certain action or not resist a certain action. And you kind of had to be like really in the dark. It couldn't, it may not even be enough if they were like, hey, I'm thinking of getting this apartment. What do you think? Should we get it? And then you're like, nah. And then they go and get it. You're like, was that fraud? Maybe. I mean, I said no, but I did know that they were thinking about it, right? Because here's the problem: the landlord, whoever is the one supposed to be collecting that rent, they want to get their rent.
Hmm.
They don't care what was going on with you and your significant other,
Right.
you and your
Right.
spouse. They're just like, you guys stay married, you get divorced, you fight, you're happy. I don't care. I want my money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
And I provide service.
exactly. And yeah, I mean, committing to give the unit a unit to somebody for a certain amount of time, that is a service and it has value. And so it can get, yeah, mushy and kind of icky. And that's why you're always better off just figuring out how to have open dialogue and work as a team in the first place.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, some couples figure that out on their own. Some couples need extra support. That's why I started my business, and it's why I wrote my book as well, to make that more accessible, because it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, the idea that it goes on, like, it wells up a whole lot of feelings in me that a person would go and behind their spouse's back do this. And
Hmm.
then maybe they like don't pay the rent. And next thing you know, a spouse with nothing to do with it. The landlord's coming after them or collections agencies coming after them. I mean, that's not fun. That's
Yeah.
super stressful. That's cost money. Like it shouldn't happen. But I know part of what you're about is like, let's be real about what is out there and what may not be quite what it looks like. And, so hopefully people will recognize that and, you know, just be on the lookout, right? Like if you see mail that is like out of the ordinary, right? You just if you suspect something's going on, keep your eye on any shared bank accounts. Keep your eye on the mail. Look for a name of a creditor, like a landlord that you might not recognize. Look for different addresses on papers that your
Hmm.
spouse may have. I'm not saying that it's a good thing to be like playing detective with your spouse and you might feel like it's sneaking around. But if you have a concern that they're hiding something from you and you've tried to talk to them and you're not kind of okay with their answer, you're not sure how you feel, then at the very least, keep your eyes open. Um,
Hmm.
and you might catch something, and that could help you avoid a situation like this
Gotcha.
and handle it.
Gotcha. So one of the things that I've noticed recently is that couples who own a home may have decided to either rent one of their spare bedrooms to a roommate or use that room to for an Airbnb rental for someone who may be vacationing in the area or at a conference or something like that. Um, so how do you recommend like couples discuss that or explore that potential opportunity?
Yeah. And it makes sense, by the way, if you're in this position, I mean, a lot of costs of rent or mortgage, they're higher than they may in some cases ever have been. And so I appreciate if you're trying to be creative and think about how to be more responsible and live within your means or what have you. How I would address it, I would say conversation, calculation, decision, right? Conversation means let's talk about how we feel about this idea, what worries us about it, what makes us feel anxious or scared, and really hear each other, right? As an example, uh, as a man, I forget sometimes that a woman experiences the world differently. So whereas I have no qualms or fewer qualms about, let's say, talking to a stranger or engaging with someone who asks me a question on the street, my wife reminds me it's not necessarily the same for her. And when you're talking about bringing potentially a stranger into your home, right, there it could be different depending on you and your significant others' identities or life experiences. So hear that out. Hear just even in general about your concerns around privacy, how it would affect you, how it would influence different aspects of your lives. That's the conversation. The calculation is figure out, okay, if we're able to bring in an extra X dollars a month, say $1,000 a month, how will that actually impact our finances? Right. So
Mhm.
you got to know how much are we bringing in now? What are our expenses? What debts do we owe? What items of value, aka assets, do we own? And then if we add $1,000 to our bottom line, how would that affect us? What would that make possible? What would that alleviate? Get a real sense of how it would affect you so that you can look and say, not just, do we want to have a roommate or not? Or do we want to have an Airbnb person or not in here sometimes? It's the question is, if we had a roommate, it would we would expect it would bring in extra dollars, and that would allow for such and such. Is such and such worth having the roommate?
Mhm.
Right? Because the dollars really matter in terms of what they do for you, how they affect
Mhm.
you. And then decision is like take that information, the numbers that you have, take the conversations you've been having and your subjective preferences, and then do that couples adulting thing and work it out and come to a decision. And if needed, try and build some flexibility into that decision that maybe you don't give the first person roommate coming in as a roommate a 3-year lease, right? Maybe you give them month to month or six
Yeah.
months or what have you. This way, if it really doesn't work out, you have options.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Options are always nice.
Hmm.
Um, so kind of as we wrap up here, what what pearls of wisdom or advice would you leave with our audience as they wrestle as they're in their relationships wrestling with this increased inflation and cost of living and all of these challenges that we're faced with currently?
Yeah, I mean, these problems are affecting people all over the map, figuratively and literally map. Uh, Take the time to talk with your partner, establish safety and trust around money and money related topics. Take the time to understand where you actually are at financially and what your goals are and what it'll take to achieve them. And it's fine to solicit opinions or, read books or watch YouTube channels. There could be a lot of great value, but be mindful that your life is could be different in important ways than other people's, right? So don't take the old advice as still gospel. And one that always comes to mind is like that idea of 20% down if you're going to purchase a home. There are advantages to that. You have a smaller mortgage payment. You might not have to get mortgage insurance. You have more built-in equity when you start, which can help later. On the other hand, imagine you're buying $1 million home, which is very typical of someone living in one of the bigger cities in LA, New York. Uh, the difference between putting 10% down and 20% down on $1 million home is $100,000 more that you can keep in your accounts, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Extension of that idea with renting. With renting, you typically have a down payment. It might be 1 to 3 months worth of rent, but that's going to be a whole lot less than 10% of the cost of a home
Right.
in almost all cases. So there's benefits to having cash. There's also benefits to owning a property. You have more freedom what to do with it, and you can build equity, but you could also go down in value and you're responsible for costs, right? So I don't have to belabor all the specifics, but the point is what conventional wisdom has been, even if it made sense at the time, things have changed. Our job market has changed. Our housing market has changed. Uh, we are living longer. And so we have to save more money to have the same type of standard of living in retirement than our parents did. So really look at your own situation and don't be afraid to do something that's against the grain or even that other people might be critical of if you believe it's what fits you, your spouse, your family, and your needs best.
All right. Well, we've been spending some time today with Adam Cole, certified financial therapist, certified mediator, and tax attorney, and author of the new book, Financial Intimacy for Couples: How to Achieve Clarity, Teamwork, and Peace of Mind with Your Money. Thanks for coming on the show, Adam.
Thank you for having me, Justin. Great to see you.
Yeah. I really appreciate the advice Adam had for couples looking to rent. As renting is a massive financial decision, both people in the relationship need to have ownership of the decision. This will prevent resentment or passive aggressive behavior due to one person feeling less a part of the relationship. Focusing immediately on the numbers is a huge mistake. First, determine what the needs and wants of your partner are, allowing you to put those numbers into the proper perspective. Give yourselves the grace to make mistakes. The lease is only 12 months. If it didn't go how you thought it would, your chance to adjust is not that far away. Signing a lease may very well obligate your spouse to be responsible for it, whether they wanted it or not. If you believe financial decisions are being hidden from you, check the mail and your accounts for any strange letters, correspondence, or transactions. And don't just assume that conventional financial wisdom still applies to you. Think it through and make the best financial decision for you. Thanks for watching Renter Confidential. Happy apartment hunting. And remember, when it comes to renting, insider information is the best roommate you can ever have.